Hi, this is Navin, rule number 49, and my topic is about the law of diminishing marginal utility. First, we see the marginal. The term marginal refers to the effects of a small changes in consumption. Marginal considerations are considerations which concern a slight increase or reduction of the stock of anything which we possess. Utility, the consumption of various unit of commodity. Total utility to you, the sum of total of satisfaction which a consumer receives by consuming the various unity of the commodity. The more unit of a commodity he consumes, the greater will be his total utility. This is the total utility. Measures of utility. First is initial utility, total utility, and marginal utility. Relationship between total utility and marginal utility. The table contains the quantity, total utility, marginal utility. For quantity 1, the total utility is 10 and the marginal utility is 10. And for quantity 2, the total utility is 18 and the marginal utility varies from 10 to 18 to 10, 10 to 8. And in third quantity, the total utility is 24 and it is varying from 24, 18 and 6. And the quantity 4, the total utility is 28 and it is varying from 28 to 24 is equals to 4. For quantity 5, the total utility is 30 and it is varying from 30 to 28, where marginal utility is equals to 2. For quantity 6, the total utility is 30 and it is varying from 30 to 30, where the marginal utility is equals to 0. For quantity 7, the total utility is 28. It is varying from 28 to 30, where marginal utility is equals to minus 2. Here it comes the negative. Marginal utility. The concept of marginal utility grew out of attempts by economists to explain the determination of price. Marginal utility can be defined as a measure of relative satisfaction gained or lost from an increase or decrease in the consumption that good or service. Examples: a motor vehicle or a haircut. Definition. The law of diminishing marginal utility describes a familiar and fundamental tendency of human behavior. The law of diminishing marginal utility states that as a consumer consumes more and more units of a specific commodity, utility from the successive unit goes on diminishing. This is the definition of the law of diminishing marginal utility. It describes a familiar and fundamental tendency of human behavior. As a consumer consumes more and more units of a specific commodity, utility from the successive units goes on diminishing. Assumptions of the law. Various units of goods are homogeneous. There is no time gap between consumption of the different units. Consumer is rational, so aims at maximization of utility of the product. Tastes, preferences and passion remain unchanged. Consumers possess perfect knowledge of the price in the market. No price change. It assumes law of marginal diminishing utility. Utilities of different commodities are independent of each other. Law based upon three facts. The law of diminishing utility is based upon three facts. Firstly, secondly, and thirdly. Firstly, it wants of a man are unlimited, but single want can be satisfied. As a man gets more and more units of a commodity, the desire of his want for that good goes on falling. goes on falling. A point is reached when the consumer no longer wants any more units of that good. The law based upon 3 points, and in second point, different goods are not perfect substitutes for each other in the satisfaction of various particular wants. In third, there is no change in the tastes of the consumers. These are the three facts of the law of diminishing utility. Example of the law. Suppose a person is thirsty and the price of water is 0. He takes one glass of water which gives him great satisfaction. We can say the first glass of water has great utility for him. He then takes second glass of water. The utility of the second glass of water is less than that the first glass of water. The utility declines because the edge of his thirst has been blunted to a great extent. If he drinks third glass of water, the utility of the third glass will be less than the second and so on. The utility goes on diminishing with the consumption of every successive glass of water till it drops down to 0. It is the position of consumer equilibrium or maximum satisfaction. If the consumer is forced further to take a glass of water, it leads to disutility, causing total utility to decline. The marginal utility will become negative. A rational consumer will stop taking water at the point at which marginal utility becomes negative, even if the good is free. In short, when a good is free, a consumer increases consumption of a good so long its additional units provide him positive marginal utility. This is the explanation of the law of diminishing marginal utility. The following table will make the law of diminishing marginal utility. It contains the units, total unit utility and the marginal utility. For the first class, the total utility is 20 and the marginal utility is 20. And for the second class, the total utility is 32, but the marginal utility will be total utility minus the marginal utility of the first class, so it becomes 12. Whereas it will goes on until the marginal utility will become the negative. The marginal utility will becomes negative if we consume the sixth glass. It is clear that in a given span of time, the first glass of water to a thirsty man gives 20 units of utility. When he takes second glass of water, the marginal utility goes down to 12 units. When he consumes fifth glass of water, the marginal utility drops down to 0, and if the consumption of water is forced further from this point, the utility changes into disutility, that is minus 3. It becomes the negative if it goes on taking the water. Here it may be noted that the utility of the successive units consumed diminishes not because they are of inferior in quality than that of others. We assume that all the units of a commodity consumed are exactly alike. In this, the first glass of water to a thirsty man gives 20 units of utility. When he takes second glass of water, the marginal utility goes down to 12 units. When he consumes fifth glass of water, the marginal utility drops down to 0. And if the consumption of water is forced further from this point, that is fifth glass, then the utility changes into disutility, that is negative. It becomes from 0 to minus. Here it may be noted that the utility of the successive unit consumed diminishes not because they are of inferior in quality than that of others. We assume that all the units of a commodity consumed are exactly alike. The graph will make the law of diminishing marginal utility. It contains the initial utility, diminishing curve, and the 0 marginal utility. It goes down and diminishing the utility, marginal utility. OX we observe units of commodity consumed and OY is shown the marginal utility derived from them. The marginal utility of the first glass of water is called initial utility. It is equal to 20 units. The MU of the fifth glass of water is 0. It is called the satiety point. The MU of the sixth glass of water is negative minus 3. Tie MU curve here the lies between the below the OX axis. The utility curve falls from left down to the right, showing that the marginal utility of the success units of glasses of water is falling. When a good is scarce and so priced, the consumer will increase the consumption of commodity up to the extent where his marginal utility for the good equals the price which he has to pay. That is, MU is equals to P. Limitations of the law. Case of intoxicants, consumptions of liquor defies the law for a short period. The more person drinks, the more he likes it. Application to money. The law of equally holds good for money. It is true that more money than the man has, the more greedy. Rare collection. If there are only two diamonds in the world, the possession of second diamond will push up the marginal utility. Example, collection of the rare stamps and coins. Utility is subject to cardinal measurements of utility is not possible. Every commodity is not an independent commodity. Marginal utility cannot be estimated for all commodities. Doesn't explain different paradox. That's all about my topic. Thank you.